All rise and remain standing. Hear ye, hear ye. The mock trial court of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is now in session. The Honorable Justice Rick Tivnan presiding. All persons of business hearing cannot be heard. You may be seated.
Court is now in session. We will be hearing today the case of Commonwealth v. Larson. Are all the parties ready to go?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Right. I just instructed jury early on that this is a first-degree murder case that involves the death of one human being by another. It is stipulated in advance that the defendant killed this person. The matter issue is not whether or not the defendant actually killed the person. It's whether or not the PTSD the defendant claims to be suffering from allowed her to form the intent to kill that person. So I put that in your mind as we start. Is this clear? And as we said earlier, you'll be asked at the end to render a verdict as the jury. You're going to be a collective jury. Okay? Are there any pretrial matters that will be addressed?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening. My name is Shirley Yusuke, and before we start, I'd like to give my co-counsel the opportunity to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. Your Honor, my name is Paul Foley.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Roy McDonald.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Sophie Chen.
Is there a preliminary matter you wish to address?
Yes, Your Honor. Before we start, I'd like to enter the stipulations to evidence.
Has the opposing counsel seen the stipulations?
No, Your Honor.
Permission to approach the bench.
Permission granted.
Permission to freely vote the court.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Any objections by the defense to the stipulations?
No objections, Your Honor.
The stipulations of both parties are entered into evidence. Are there any other pretrial matters that need to be addressed?
No, Your Honor.
Any pretrial matters on the defense side?
No, Your Honor.
Is the prosecution ready to make their opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Anger, jealousy, opportunity, revenge. All crucial elements involved in the tragic and untimely death of the young and intelligent Jamie Frosch. For years, the defendant Cesar Larson and Jamie had been nemesis. They attended the Pletner Cooperative Learning Center together, where Jamie would sometimes tease the defendant due to her poor academic standing and prioritization of sports, dating, and partying. In conjunction with parental pressures of a traditional path, from high school to college to law or business school, the defendant internalized these criticisms and actively retaliated. She would repeatedly threaten to kill Jamie, using her fingers to mimic a gun shooting gesture at him. Her seemingly fanatic love of guns is what solidified these threats. Seeing Jamie effortlessly get straight A's in school while the defendant constantly struggled was so frustrating that in the midst of her senior year, she abandoned her parents' expectations and enlisted in the Marines. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant's needs are clear. She had been shooting with her father since she was 13 years old, still had access to his weapons, and had acquired astute knowledge on how to use guns, when, and for what effect. On to the fateful evening of July 4th, 2016. The defendant and Alex Hoffman go to the Schneider's restaurant for dinner before the fireworks display at Stanley Park. While they are eating, Jamie and Jill Graham enter the scene, and tension pervades the air as Jamie goes over to greet the defendant. Rather than let bygones be bygones, the defendant reverts back to old behavior, again threatening Jamie with her gun shooting gesture. Alex anxiously ushers Jill and Jamie back to their seats and cautions them to stay away from the defendant. He walks on eggshells all night, unsure if mentioning his friendship with Jamie will be enough to set the defendant off. They all finish eating and head over to Stanley Park for the fireworks display. Upon arrival, some firecrackers go off before the fireworks start, And as soon as they do, the defendant seizes the opportunity to exact revenge on Jamie for his stable life, for doubting her, and forever making her feel inferior. She gets up, takes out her carefully concealed 9mm caliber Klagsburn, takes aim, and shoots Jamie 4 times, putting 2 bullets in his head and 2 in his chest, making good on her DQ promise that a bullet in Jamie's head and he was dead. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today we will hear the testimony of Detective DeVay F. Wallace, who has accumulated 31 years of experience in the Martins Landing Police Department, been extensively trained in forensics, crime scene analysis, and witness interview techniques, and has come to the conclusion that the defendant has put on a well-orchestrated act. The evidence will show that the murder weapon, the Klagsburn, had been cleaned and oiled just a few days before the murder, as if the owner knew it would be used soon. How the setting, fireworks at Stanley Park, had been intentionally chosen since the sound of the gunshot could be muffled by the fireworks and escape was facilitated by the crowded environment. And finally, how the defendant's apartment had been filled with PTSD informational resources that one could memorize in order to act the part of a soldier actually suffering from PTSD. Next, we will hear from Jamie's best friend, Joe Graham, who witnessed the rivalry between Cesar Larson and Jamie Frosch firsthand for years. The evidence will show that the defendant could always be seen tormenting younger, more vulnerable PCLC students while they were in high school, bullying Jamie and making gun shooting gestures at him. She will express how the defendant has always been a hothead, quick to react when angry, and how she had threatened to take Jamie's life on too many occasions for this murder to merely be a coincidence. Lastly, we will hear the testimony of Dr. Dana Pilch, a clinical psychologist at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts. She has been working in the medical field, specifically with soldiers and veterans, for over 2 decades. For her elaboration on the array of exams she administered to Cesar and her neglect to attend follow-up screenings, we will see what made her come to the conclusion that the defendant has put on a well-orchestrated show. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are not here to discredit the hardships the defendant endured during her time in Afghanistan, but to say that she was suffering from a PTSD-induced hallucination when shooting Jamie Frosch, despite never having experienced one before that moment, and divert culpability away from the witness would be a gross error in justice. The prosecution holds the burden of proof in this case, and I am confident that the forthcoming evidence will convey beyond a reasonable doubt that this crime was one rooted in revenge and not the result of a hallucinogenic episode. Regardless of this case's outcome, a young man with such a bright future has passed, and there is nothing we can do to bring him back. But what we can do, what we must do, what we have a moral and judicial obligation to do, is grant Jamie Frosch's friends and family peace of mind, knowing that the one that wrongly took their loved one's life is paying for their crime. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant had the means, years of target practice experience, an arsenal of weapons, the motive, years of perceived verbal abuse from Jamie, and the opportunity to use the Sam Lee fireworks display, a patriotic event that should have been sacred to not only veterans, but to all Americans, as a cover for murder. And for that blatant disregard for all those truly suffering, we submit to you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that Cesar Larson is convicted of first-degree murder, which is murder committed with deliberately premeditated malice aforethought, extreme atrocity or cruelty, or in the commission or attempted commission of a crime punishable with death or imprisonment for life, in connection with the death of Jamie Frosch. Thank you. Thank you.
Is the defense ready to make their opening statements?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Asma Sultani, and before I deliver my opening statement, I would like to give my co-counsel the opportunity to introduce themselves.
Okay.
My name is Maribel Lewis.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Harrison Zyberg.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Bertie Siggett.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Catherine Machado. Permission to leave the courtroom.
Permission granted. Proceed, ma'am.
Today, you will hear the story of the American soldier that was neglected. Neglected by her friends, neglected by the medical profession, and most of all, neglected by her country. Now, you're also going to hear some negative things about Miss Larson, specifically about her past with Mr. Frosch. However, at the age of 18, when Miss Larson enlisted in the Marines, she decided to turn her life around. She was no longer this troublesome high school adolescent that Miss Grant will try to describe today. Cesar Larson had become an American hero. The prosecution holds the burden of proof today, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and they must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Miss Larson was in the right state of mind the night of July 4th, 2016, when she shot and killed Jamie Frosch during a public firework display at Stanley Park. They will not be able to meet this heavy burden. One of the most gruesome experiences Miss Larson met on her deployment to Afghanistan was the explosion by the Taliban insurgency on October 29th of 2015. She saw fellow Marines and 2 close friends die right in front of her eyes. Blood was everywhere, Marines shot, blown up. So horrid and frightful, to the point where Miss Larson failed to notice that she too had been shot and almost died. After throwing an airstrike back, Miss Larson was sure she had neutralized her enemy. Following the injury sustained, Miss Larson went through a brief 4-hour counseling session created by the prosecution's own witness, Dr. Pilch. After a mere 4 hours, Miss Larson was rushed back into combat. Following her discharge in February, only 4 months after the attack, Dr. Pilch, the same person who threw Miss Larson back into combat, spent just 15 minutes with her before releasing her. 15 minutes, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. It took 15 minutes to determine Miss Larson's mental stability. Miss Larson has not been the same since that attack. She's mentally fragile, if not mentally damaged. Fast forward to July 4th, 2016. It's crowded, noisy, and dark. Miss Larson is surrounded by hundreds of unfamiliar faces in the dark night. Loud bangs are coming from left and right, strikingly similar to the attacks by the insurgency. Miss Larson's survival instincts kicked in, and just as any other Marine under attack would have, she jumped up, turned around, and began shooting. She had no other choice. On the night of July 4th, 2016, she knew she had no other choice. She had finally neutralized her enemy, or at least that's what she thought she was doing. Even after the fatal accident, Miss Larson was still holding onto her gun and had to be tackled down by Alex Kaufman, whom you will hear from first. Mr. Kaufman is a friend to both Miss Larson and Mr. Frosch. We believe that he will attest to the fact that Miss Larson was the most disciplined person he knew from high school. We also believe that he will attest to the fact that she was not herself that night. In fact, she wasn't herself ever since she came back from her deployment. Mr. Kaufman was with Miss Larson that night, and he was the one that had to tackle her down before she could harm anyone else, including herself. The next person that you will hear from is Miss Larson herself. We believe that she will attest to the fact that for 10 months straight, her deployment to Afghanistan left her in harm's way, and how, on the night of October 29th, she was sure she was going to die that night. Our third and final witness is Dr. Paula Lee, a clinical psychologist and a veteran of the United States Army who will contradict Dr. Pilch's testimony. Dr. Lee first met Ms. Larson back in late April 2016 at an informational seminar where she noticed that Ms. Larson was asking a lot of questions regarding PTSD. Dr. Lee met with Ms. Larson again soon after her arrest, where she performed an extensive background interview, as well as a personality test designed to give basis for psychological diagnosis. This test showed that Ms. Larson not only suffered from PTSD, but as well as both anxiety and depression. This test further showed that Ms. Larson suffered from delayed onset PTSD, which is what Dr. Pilch had failed to notice. Delayed onset PTSD means that Ms. Larson's symptoms would not have been present at the time that Dr. Pilch diagnosed her, thus leading to a faulty diagnosis of combat stress. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Ms. Larson acted out the night of July 4th, 2016 due to an induced hallucination that brought her back to a frightening night of October 29, 2015. One of the essential elements of first-degree murder requires the prosecution to prove that the defendant unjustifiably killed another, and that he or she intended to kill or do grievous bodily harm to the victim with premeditated malice aforethought. The prosecution will fail to prove this. After hearing witness testimony, we submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that you do not find Ms. Larson guilty of murder in the first degree. Thank you.
Is the prosecution ready to call their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Prosecution would like to call Detective David S. Wallace.
Good evening, Detective. I ask you to raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear to affirm and tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and according to the rules of mock trial and all affidavits?
Yes. May I proceed?
You may proceed now.
Will you please state your name for the court?
My name is David Foster Wallace. What's your profession, Ms. Wallace? I'm a detective with the Martins Landing Police Department, and I've been on the force for over 31 years. Have you received any previous training regarding your field? Yes, I was a part of the police academy where I learned CPR, defense tactics, and basic force. Now, I would like to direct attention to July 4th, 2016. What were you doing at that night? I was on duty at the station, but around 9 p.m., I received a radio call from a frantic patrol officer. What event happened after you received the call? The officer, James Warren, had informed me that there had been a shooting at the park. What happened next? About a half hour later, Officer Chu, arrived at the station with the suspect, Cesar Lewis. What if anything happened when they arrived at the station? We proceeded to book Larson, which went smoothly. Did Larson say anything? Larson did turn off. How was Larson's demeanor? Larson seemed very calm on his word. Now, I would like to focus on the evidence collected at the station. Did you find anything on Larson? Yes, Larson had a Swiss Army knife, a wallet that contained a license to carry a concealed weapon, and 2 business cards. One for Dr. Dana Pillage, a psychologist with the Veterans Administration ID, and the Veterans Administration ID card. What if any other evidence was obtained at the station? Officer Chu had provided me with Larson's pistol, and I inspected it. As a result of your investigation, did you learn where the weapon was found? Yes, the weapon was found at the crime scene, and it was secured in an evidence bag. What evidence did you learn about the weapon? It was a Class 1 9mm semi-automatic, commonly referred to as the St. Louis Special Model. What can you tell us about the gun? This is a relatively small weapon, but it's quite powerful. What evidence did you notice about the weapon? This gun normally holds 6 bullets, but the other 4 had been fired recently, and it was also apparent that it had been cleaned and oiled sometime before that. What evidence did you do after you inspected the pistol? I put Larson in an interview room and Mirandized her. What did you do next? I proceeded to interrogate her about the shooting. Now, I would like to talk about the interview with Larson. Can you describe Larson's response as you asked her a question regarding the shooting? Yes, I asked Larson if she had shot anyone at the park, and she just shook her head no. What any other question did you ask her? I asked Larson if she had known Jamie Frosch. What was her response? It appeared that her eyes showed a glimmer of recognition.
Objection, Your Honor. It's outside of the scope of this witness to testify to a glimmer of recognition.
Outside the scope of the witness?
Yes.
Can you respond now?
I'm asking witness to testify to her own observation, so it's inside her scope to testify to whatever it appeared to her.
She's testifying to what appeared just to her.
Mm-hmm.
All right, overruled.
What was her response? It appeared that her eyes showed a glimmer of recognition, and she said that she did no wrong. What evidence did you do to further your investigation? I reviewed the eyewitness statements that were given to me by Officer Warren. What evidence else did you do to further your investigation? I went to look at Frosch's body. What did you gather from this part of the investigation? The medical examiner had done a preliminary autopsy, which concluded that the death of Jamie Frosch was a result of the 4 gunshot wounds, 2 to the head and 2 to the chest. What was your observation on the wound? The entry wound seemed closely grooved. What did you learn about the shooting? It appeared to me that the shooting was a result of wildfire, and the shooter had taken carefully. And who, if anyone, was shot by Cecil Larson?
Out of everyone that night, it seemed that only Jamie Foxx was shot by Cesar Larson.
What thing did you do after you took a look at the body?
I obtained a search warrant for Larson's apartment and inspected it.
What evidence did you find in Larson's house?
I had found a pile of rejection letters from companies that Larson had recently applied for jobs.
What evidence did you find in the apartment?
I had also found a collection of pamphlets with a checklist of symptoms.
What anything else did you find in the apartment?
I had also found Larson's laptop, which on its web browser history revealed that she had done some research on PTSD.
What evidence did you notice in the apartment?
I found Larson's closet, which contained an extensive collection of weapons.
What kind of weapon specifically did you find in Larson's closet?
Several hunting rifles, a variety of knives, and a dozen pistols.
What evidence did you learn about the weapon?
Several of the weapons were pretty serious, large caliber, semi-automatic pistols that could hold more than 15 rounds in a clip.
What did you do next?
I collected up all the evidence and brought it back to the station.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examine the witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Detective, I'd like to bring your attention to the 4th of July this past year. You were on duty at the station.
Yes.
That night, you got a call from Officer Orr that there was a shooting at Stanley Park.
Yes.
So that would obviously mean that you were not there when the shooting took place.
Yes, that's correct.
So that would also mean that all of your information is being given to you secondhand.
Yes, by my trusted officers.
And is it also true that after you learned about the shooting, you didn't go to investigate the scene immediately?
No, not immediately. I was busy with other parts of the investigation.
In fact, you didn't go to the crime scene until the next day.
No, I did not.
Now, when Cesar Larson was brought to the station, you interviewed him.
Yes.
During that interview, you only give you your name, rank, and military unit.
Yes, that's correct.
And you also searched Miss Larson.
Yes.
During that search, you found a card for a psychologist named Judge.
Yes.
You eventually called Dr. Judge.
Yes.
You wanted to know if she remembered anything about Miss Larson.
Yes.
And from what Dr. Pilch showed you, she did not remember anything about Miss Larson, correct?
Objection on her hearsay.
Your Honor, no specific statement was entered in the question.
You were saying it's hearsay?
Yes, because he tried to prove the evidence in his statement that Dr. didn't actually remember about his Mars, which is part of the evidence he tried.
All right. And you're saying there's no statement?
Yes, there's no specific statement entered in the question.
All right, I'll overrule it now.
Thank you.
Now, from what Dr. Pilch showed you, she didn't remember much about Cesar Larson, correct?
Yes.
Now, in your affidavit, you also claim that Miss Larson had the look of someone who had been caught.
Yes, that's what I initially thought.
So you thought she looked guilty.
Yes, that's what I initially thought.
Now, you thought this before you fully investigated the incident.
Yes, that was my first assumption.
And you thought this before you had interviewed any of the witnesses.
Yes, that was my first.
And you thought this before you went to the crime scene.
Yes.
Now, you don't want to jump to any conclusions in this case.
Yes.
Even though just earlier now, and in your affidavit, you told us that Miss Larson looked guilty before your investigation was complete.
Yes, that's what I initially thought.
Now, later you went to Miss Larson's house,
Yes.
and you found Miss Larson's guns.
Yes.
Now, they were all well taken care of.
Yes.
And the gun that you found at the station was also well taken care of.
Yes.
So every single gun that you found that was owned by Miss Larson was cleaned and taken care of.
Yes.
And you also found PTSD research in Miss Larson's house, correct?
Yes.
Now, you can't tell me why that research was there.
No, I cannot.
And you can't even tell me who actually looked it up.
No, but it was Larson's laptop.
Yes, but you cannot 100%, with 100% certainty tell me, correct?
No, I can't.
Thank you. Now let's go back to earlier investigation. You learned that Miss Larson was offered a job at Arkansas.
Yes.
And you also read eyewitness statements.
Yes.
But you did not speak to the eyewitnesses yourself.
No, I did not. I was officers.
So that means you didn't speak to Alex Kaufman.
No, I didn't.
You didn't speak to the man who was standing right next to Cesar Larson when the shooting took place.
No, but my trusted officers did.
But you yourself did not.
No, but my officers did.
Objection, Your Honor, what's relevant? That Cesar Larson already admitted that he did the shooting. So what's relevant that detective actually witnessed, talked to the witness, what he did with the witness?
It goes to the overall credibility of her case. Of her-
It's not a matter of the court that they were trying to prove that Cesar Larson is premeditated and
All right. So you're saying, what's the relevance of him asking whether or not she talked to the witness?
yes.
You're saying?
That goes to the overall credibility of her investigation.
All right, I'll strike that whole piece about whether or not she asked. I'm striking that question. All right? You can move on.
Now, let's move to when you went to the crime scene. By the time you went to the crime scene, almost an entire day had passed from the start of your investigation, correct?
Yes.
And you didn't personally secure the crime scene.
No, but my officers did.
Objection, Your Honor, again, what's relevant?
Again, Your Honor, this goes to the overall credibility of her investigation into this crime.
I'm going to let it go a little bit as to like the thoroughness of her investigation, how far she went investigating the crime. So I'm going to let it go for a minute. The first one, as far as the jury's concerned about whether or not you talked to the witness, we're going to have that, to disregard that question, but I'm going to let it go a little bit because it does speak to how far she went investigating.
Now, you didn't personally secure the crime scene, did you?
No, but my officers did.
So you can't tell me from personal first-hand knowledge what happened to the crime scene in those 24 hours you weren't there.
No, but the officers that I had there.
But you can't from personal first-hand
No,
knowledge.
I did not.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Is there a redirect of this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
May.
Detective Ellis, through 31 years of experience, is that fair to say you're a well-trained detective who did every single step of your investigation to your best ability when you are solving this case?
Yes, I did a thorough investigation like I do with all my other cases.
Detective, is that normal for you trained officer who receives first-hand information and report directly to you?
Yes, we're a team, so they have just as much training and experience as I do.
Detective, to your best of knowledge, is the gun brought into court today seen clean, oiled, and prepared to shoot someone?
Yes.
No further question, Lawyer.
Recross of the witness?
Yes, Your Honor. So the gun that you found was cleaned, correct?
Yes.
Along with every single other gun that Ms. Larson owned.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
The witness is excused. Thank you. Detective. Is the prosecution ready to call their next witness?
Yes, Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution will have J. Graham to stand.
Good evening, Ms. Graham. Please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear to affirm and tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, according to mock trial and rules and affidavits.
I do.
All right, you're on your oath, and you may proceed.
Can you please state your name for the court?
Jill Graham.
How are you involved in this case?
Well, Jamie Frosch was my best friend and I was with him the night that he died.
How long did you know Jamie?
I know Jamie almost my whole life. We went to high school together, we went to elementary school together, we even roomed together when I went to Harvard and he went to MIT.
Do you know the defendant?
I do. Zazer and I went to cooperative learning together as well. We played on the same softball team. We spent some time on the bus and bench together also.
How was your relationship with the defendant?
It wasn't that great. Zazer was really mean to Jamie.
The defendant seemed kind of mean to Jamie. How so?
Well, Zazer let it be known at times that she would kill Jamie.
So after she burned his life, what if anyone incident were there of the threats?
Well, one night at DQ, Dairy Queen, Jamie and Zazer fought pretty bad, and I was there, and Zazer seemed really upset.
The defendant seemed frustrated. What if anything did you see him do?
I saw Zazer raise two fingers there like a gun and point them at Jamie.
What, have
Well, Caesar lunged at Jamie, had to be restrained by 3 people, and even let it be known that she had guns in her trunk. Oh, what?
What if they weren't here when they're off defending right?
Well, all through high school, Caesar always threatened Jamie.
What if they think that this tell you about their relationship?
It tells me that they didn't have a good relationship and never got along.
Now, let's go back to the date together. What happened on the date together between the defendant and Mitch?
Well, Jamie and I went to the restaurant where Alex works, and Caesar was there, who was tormenting Jamie like crazy.
Defendant was acting up. How so?
Well, Caesar had told Jamie to go run to the
Objection, Your Honor, that's hearsay.
May I be heard? It's exception, hearsay, so he said defendant.
Defense statements of hearsay objection. Overruled. Thank you.
Defendant was acting up. How so?
Well, Caesar even told Jamie to go run to his mom.
What if anything did Jamie do?
Well, Jamie got his food and then waited for me outside.
What did you do?
Well, I went to go talk to Alex about meeting up later at St. Park for the 4th of July fireworks.
And who if anyone was with Alex?
Caesar Larson was with them.
Then what happened?
Well, Jamie and I got to the park where we had sat down at a picnic bench, and Alex and Caesar arrived, and not to my surprise, Caesar sat 50 feet in front of us.
Why was that surprising?
Because out of everywhere in the park, she sat 50 feet in front of us, and we had just seen her at the restaurant where she was tormenting Jamie.
Then what happened?
Then Alex had come up to us and let it be known that we should probably stay away from Caesar, that she was just not having a good night.
Why didn't they have a clear concern before the shooting occurred?
Jamie did ask Alex if it was a problem that Jamie was there.
Alex was going back and forth. Did that surprise you?
It did surprise me. Caesar was sitting 50 feet in front of us.
Did that concern you?
Yes! The last thing I wanted to do was start trouble at the park.
Then what happened?
Then Alex walked back to Caesar.
What happened next?
Then the fireworks went off. Caesar pulled out her gun, shot 4 times. Jamie was shot.
How did you react?
I was so scared. Jamie had just been shot. Out of everyone in the park, Jamie was the only one shot.
No further question.
We have a cross-exam of this witness.
Yes, there is, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Graham.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Graham, you knew Ms. Larson from high school, correct?
I did.
You didn't like her though, did you?
I wouldn't say that.
You didn't get along?
I wouldn't say that.
You testified on direct exam that Ms. Larson was claiming she was going to shoot Ms. Frosch?
Yes,
But you never saw a gun, did you?
not back then.
In fact, you never saw any guns, did you?
Not back then.
Ms. Graham, the last time you saw Ms. Larson was when you were 18,
Yes,
and you're 25 now.
I am.
It's been 7 years since you last saw Ms. Larson, hasn't it?
It has.
Now, you're aware of Ms. Larson's deployment to Afghanistan?
I am aware.
How she was wounded in a nasty battle and has spent months in the hospital?
I did hear about that.
So it's possible that she's no longer the same person you're describing here today in court, the 18-year-old Caesar?
It's possible.
And when you first saw Ms. Larson since she got back from her deployment, she seemed different, didn't she?
Well, yeah.
She was jumpy.
Yeah.
She was lethargic.
Yeah.
Even looked like she wasn't getting enough sleep.
It did look like that.
You two had a short little conversation, didn't you?
We did.
She let me know that she was having trouble finding work.
Caesar said that.
You even went out of your way to find a possible position for someone with her qualifications.
I did.
Miss Larson even thanked you, didn't she?
Yes.
She didn't try to fight you like she allegedly did back in high school?
No, she did not.
And you reassured her that what's past is in the past.
I said that.
Okay. I'd like to speak to you about the night of July 4th, 2016. That was the second time you saw Miss Larson since she got back?
Yes, it was.
Mr. Kaufman approached you and let it be known that Miss Larson just wasn't right.
Yes.
That's when you, Ms. Frosh, left and decided to go eat at the Finnegan picnic area?
We did.
Sailing Park was really crowded, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the 4th of July.
Noisy too.
Yes.
And it was around nighttime that you were there?
Yes, it was.
And you were drinking, weren't you?
One drink.
So you were drinking.
Yes.
And you were able to spot Miss Larson, however, about 50 feet away from you?
I was.
But she wasn't alone, was she?
No.
That's when you noticed she was looking around a while.
I did.
She appeared nervous.
She did.
But you were sitting behind Miss Larson, weren't you?
Yes.
That's when Mr. Kaufman walked over to you again.
Yes.
He even indicated that he had lied to Miss Larson about being friends with both you and Mr. Frosh.
Alex said that.
Because he believed that Miss Larson has been having a hard time adjusting since she got back.
Yes.
He even implied that he was worried about Caesar's PTSD symptoms becoming worse.
That was said.
As soon as Mr. Kaufman reached Miss Larson, the firing began.
Yes.
But at the same time, the fireworks went off too, wasn't it?
Coincidentally.
Yes. And at one point, you even saw Miss Larson jump out of her chair after an M80 went off nearby, did you not?
Yes.
She grabbed her side,
She did.
almost as if to reach for a gun.
Yes.
That didn't seem normal to you?
Anyone grabbing a gun doesn't seem normal to me.
Miss Larson turned around all of a sudden and began shooting after the fireworks had started.
Yes.
But she was still holding on to her gun, even after Miss Frosh had already been shot.
Yeah, like she wasn't done.
Right. And she had to be tackled down by Alex Kaufman, didn't she?
Yes.
No further questions.
Is there a redirect of this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. You claim that defendant seemed lethargic and different. However, you only saw defendant for 2 short periods of time. So is it possible for her to just be tired for those 2 times?
Yes, it's possible.
And you were present for multiple threats made by defendant and your best friend.
Yes.
And your best friend was brutally shot 4 times and murdered on July 4th.
Yes.
No further question.
Recross?
Yes, Your Honor. Miss Graham, out of those 2 times that you saw Miss Larson, she seemed lethargic and jumpy, did she not?
Yes.
No further question.
Witness is excused. Thank you, ma'am. Does the prosecution have another witness?
Yes, the prosecution would like to call Dr. Rena Post to the stand.
Good evening, doctor. Will you please raise your right hand? You solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, according to the mock trial rules and affidavit. All right, you're sworn in, you're on your oath. You have your seat, sir.
Good afternoon, doctor. Could you please state your name for the court?
My name is Dana Pilch.
And what is your current occupation, Dr. Pilch?
I am currently a clinical psychologist at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Jamaica.
What education did you receive prior to your work?
I received my bachelor's in psychology at the University of Maryland in 1978. I received my master's in psychology at Georgetown University in 1980. I did an internship for about a year, and after that I received my PhD in clinical psychology at Georgetown University.
Permission to approach the bench, Your Honor?
Permission.
Your Honor, I'd like to have this document marked for identification purposes only as prosecution exhibit A.
The document is marked,
May I
Mr.
please?
Right? You may.
I've handed you the document marked as prosecution exhibit A. Could you please identify this document?
This is my curriculum vitae.
And how do you know that it's yours?
As my name on it, my professional credentials listed, I wrote it in my center right before.
Your Honor, this time I would like to ask that this document be moved into evidence as prosecution exhibit 1.
Any objections by the defense?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, the document's moved into evidence. You may proceed, sir.
So you have a PhD in psychology. What fields do you specialize in?
I specialize in the fields of combat stress and post-traumatic stress disorder.
And what, if any, publications have you written?
I have published marine stress therapy precepts, the program manual, the PTSD simple effective techniques for overcoming traumatic stress
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to ask that the court recognize Dr. Pilch as an expert in the field of post-traumatic stress disorder, so that she may offer her opinion as to whether or not Cesar Larson was suffering from PTSD at the time of the shooting.
Do I have an objection from the defense?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, the witness will be entered in as an expert witness to offer her testimony. You may proceed.
Let's move on now to your evaluation of Ms. Larson. When did you first meet Ms. Larson?
I first met the defendant on January 29, 2016, when she was being discharged. Every soldier must undergo a psychological evaluation, which is a policy of the Marine Corps.
What, if anything, are these exit screenings intended to address?
They're intending to address issues of anxiety, depression, PTSD, as well as both readjustment and psychosocial stressors.
What, if any, materials did you review regarding Ms. Larson?
I reviewed files on Ms. Larson and learned that she was injured on a roadside loss on October 29, 2015.
What, if any, notes were mentioned by the counseling psychologist in this report?
The counseling psychologist noted that she was the proud PRESUB, which is an acronym.
What, if anything, does this acronym stand for?
It stands for purpose, rapidity, order, understanding, and discretion.
What, if any, evidence did you obtain from the counseling psychologist's file regarding Ms. Larson's rehabilitation reports?
Well, I noted that after 4 individual sessions, Ms. Larson was reinstated to full combat readiness.
So Ms. Larson was found to be returned to combat readiness. Was Ms. Larson discharged after her return to combat readiness?
No, before Ms. Larson was discharged, she still had to undergo another psychological screening.
So Ms. Larson underwent another psychological screening before being discharged. When, if ever, did you personally consult with Ms. Larson?
I consulted with Ms. Larson at her discharge. I was the one who administered the psychological screening.
So you conducted several tests to screen for PTSD.
Objection, Your Honor. When did she say that she administered the test?
What?
She never mentioned administering the test yet.
You're saying
It's
this
a
is
leading
a
question.
leading question.
I'll withdraw that question.
All right. Question withdrawn. What is the statement?
When, if ever, did you personally consult with Ms. Larson?
I consulted with Ms. Larson at her discharge. I was the one who administered the psychological screening.
And what were these psychological screenings?
The first screening was a short scale screening, which assesses, which is a 7-item questionnaire, as well as the SPAN test and the SPAN interview.
What were the results of the short screenings?
Well, the cutoff is 4 yes responses. However, Ms. Larson only scored a 2.
So she only gave 2 out of the required 4 responses. What, if anything, do these results indicate to you?
This indicated that Ms. Larson did not meet the criteria for a more structured interview or further contesting evaluation.
What were the results of the SPAN test?
The SPAN test, Ms. Larson only scored a 3 out of the required 5.
So she only scored 3 out of the required 5. What, if anything, did these results indicate to you?
Again, Ms. Larson did not meet the criteria for further contesting evaluation.
And what were the results of the sprint interview?
The sprint interview, Ms. Larson only scored a 4 out of the required 14.
And what did these results indicate to you?
That Ms. Larson did not meet the criteria for further contesting evaluation.
What, if any, findings can you report from these interviews?
I concluded that from the results of all the questionnaires that Ms. Larson did not meet the criteria for further contesting evaluation or more structured interview.
So Ms. Larson was found to not need further PTSD screenings. What, if anything, did you do after her screenings?
I had a brief conversation with Ms. Larson. I gave her advice for if she ever felt anxiety or depression in her return to civilian life.
What, if any, follow-up recommendations do you know of Ms. Larson failing to meet?
Ms. Larson also...
Objection, Your Honor. Leading question. She never said that she failed to meet.
Okay, I'll rephrase my question, Your Honor. What, if any, follow-up...
Sustained.
What, if any, follow-up questions include Ms. Larson?
I gave her advice that she can join a counseling group run by the Department of Veteran Affairs. To my knowledge, Ms. Larson never took this next step.
What, if any, other recommended actions did Ms. Larson fail to fully meet?
Ms. Larson also never showed up for the 90-day post-discharge house screening.
Let's move on now to your medical diagnosis of Ms. Larson. What, if any, opinions can you draw from your evaluation of Ms. Larson?
In my opinion, Ms. Larson was not suffering from PTSD after her return to civilian life. While she may have readjustment stress, her symptoms are not severe enough to constitute constituted as PTSD.
When, if ever, did you meet with Ms. Larson again?
I met with Ms. Larson following the incident of July 4, 2016, upon the request of the Commonwealth. They described incidents of hallucination. I was startled to hear this because Ms. Larson failed to ever once mention this to me.
Larson never mentioned any hallucinations to you. What, if anything, did you conclude from your second interview with Ms. Larson?
I concluded that Ms. Larson was not suffering from PTSD after July 4, 2016.
In your medical opinion, why did you conclude that Ms. Larson was not suffering from PTSD?
Well, I based my opinion on my interview with her, and after reading her file thoroughly, I concluded that even if Ms. Larson were to have PTSD, her symptoms was not severe enough to constitute it as PTSD, and if she were to have it, she would not have shot Jamie Frosch.
Thank you for the question.
Cross-examine this witness.
Yes, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Good afternoon, Dr. Welch. Good afternoon. Let's go to January 29, 2016. You met with Ms. Larson to administer her discharge interview?
Yes, I did.
Prior to this interview, you reviewed Ms. Larson's file, correct?
Yes.
You read about her injuries during her second deployment to Kandahar?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
You understood that she had been through a traumatizing incident regarding fireballs, explosions, and a shootout with 100 members of the Taliban?
Yes, that's very common for Alaska.
In the file, there were counseling notes from Ms. Larson's rehabilitation, correct?
Yes.
And the psychologist who had rehabilitated Ms. Larson only met with her 4 times. Isn't that right?
4 times is a lot, yes.
And after these 4 meetings, the psychologist decided that Ms. Larson was restored to full combat readiness?
Yes.
And the psychologist used a method called PROUD to screen and rehabilitate Ms. Larson, correct?
Yes.
You believe this procedure to be great and effective, don't you, Dr. Filch?
Very effective.
You made this procedure, didn't you, Dr. Filch?
Yes, I did 19 years ago.
So, a procedure you created was what cleared Ms. Larson of any combat stress or PTSD? Thank you, Dr. Filch. Now let's go to January 29, 2016. Ms. Larson came to your office to be screened for PTSD?
Yes.
This meeting was crucial in determining Ms. Larson's diagnosis, correct?
Yes, it is.
So, it must have taken a while to give her several PTSD tests, converse with her, and diagnose her?
Yes.
And yet, you only spent 15 minutes with her?
15 minutes, I believe, is a very long time.
You gave Ms. Larson 3 tests, all that you deemed necessary to assess PTSD, correct?
Yes.
Now, bear with me, Dr. Filch, while we figure out some math. The short screening scale for PTSD had 7 questions. SPAN had 4, and SPRINT 8 with a total of 19 questions, correct?
Yes.
The tests altogether took about 10 minutes?
Yes, about
10 minutes, almost 20 questions. That meant Ms. Larson only spent an average of 30 seconds answering each question, correct?
Yes, but she didn't have a time limit.
Yes, but that's the only time she took, correct?
Yes.
30 seconds. And in your 15 minutes, not only did you administer these questionnaires, one upon the other, but you also had a conversation with Ms. Larson, correct?
Yes, I did.
Your conversation lasted about 5 minutes?
About 5 minutes.
And during your 5-minute conversation, you noted a heavy sigh and a worried look, correct?
Yes, I did.
And yet, you discharged her, fully comfortable that she was ready to return to civilian life?
Yes.
Dr. Pilch, all service members get a 90-day post-health discharge screening, correct?
Yes, I do.
And to your knowledge, Ms. Larson didn't come to hers?
No.
As a military doctor, you know the stigma of mental health that soldiers face?
Yes.
In fact, one of the procedures that you created tried to prevent that. Isn't that right?
Yes, a procedure that I believe that's very effective.
So, a proud and strong patriot of the United States, lowered to asking for help for something mental. Embarrassment could have been the reason that Ms. Larson didn't come for more help. Isn't that right?
Yes,
Objection,
I
Your
think
Honor. It's outside the scope of this witness to testify as to whether or not Ms. Larson heard too embarrassing to reveal anything.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may be heard.
This is a psychologist who's been in this field for more than 36 years. She would know the reasons why soldiers wouldn't come to their meetings. Or at least, from her experience, would tell us.
And your objection is it's outside the scope as to her knowing why Cesar Larson didn't come?
That's right.
I'm saying it could be a possible reason. I'm not asking for the specific reason why Ms. Larson didn't come.
You're asking if it's a possible reason?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Then I'll object to speculation.
Overruled. As long as you're asking the witness to testify, if it's possible, that's the reason. It is possible.
Yes. Is it possible?
Doctor, is it possible?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
In your
You may
Are
proceed.
you the lawyer now?
In your affidavit, Dr. Filch, you say that Marshall never met the 309.81 PTSD criteria, correct?
Yes.
And yet, out of 4 criteria, Ms. Larson had symptoms of 2, correct?
Yes.
And the psychologist who didn't notice symptoms of the other 2 categories were using your procedure? Thank you, Dr. Filch. Now, you have only ever met with Ms. Larson once before this incident, correct?
Well, I meet with a lot of soldiers, so
You spent 15 minutes with her total.
15 minutes is not enough time.
You administered 3 questionnaires.
Yes.
You talked to her for less than 5 minutes.
I would say about 5 minutes.
And in fact, when Detective Wallace called you about Cesar Larson, you didn't even remember her?
At the time, I didn't know.
Dr. Pilch, when you interviewed Ms. Larson, it was 3 months after the incident with the Taliban, correct?
Yes.
Do you know what delayed onset is, Dr. Pilch?
Yes, I do.
Delayed onset says that PTSD may not be apparent until 6 months after the incident. So, it's possible that PTSD may not have been apparent at the time of your discharge.
It could.
So, Dr. Pilch, you can't testify for certain that Ms. Larson didn't have PTSD at the time of your discharge?
I believe I can.
Even though if she had delayed onset, her symptoms wouldn't have been apparent at the time of her discharge?
Yes.
So you can't testify for certain?
Well, not much.
Thank you.
Is there a redirect of the prosecution?
No, Your Honor.
You're dismissed. Thank you, Doctor. Is the prosecution going to call any more witnesses in this case?
No, Your Honor, the prosecution rests.
All right, the prosecution rests. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put the court into recess for about 7 minutes. We're going to take a recess in between the defense, prosecution and defense. I get 6:58. We're going to 6:59. We're going to reconvene at 7:06. Okay? Court is in recess. Court is back in session. Just to be clear, this is the second half now. This is the defense putting on their case. And some of the people that you've already seen are playing different roles. Just so you know, you're going to get confused. But just work. All right. So here we go. We're ready to begin. Is the defense ready to call their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to call Alex Kaufman to the stand.
Good evening, Mr. Kaufman. Please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, according to the mock trial rules and affidavit? All right, you're under oath.
May I proceed?
You may proceed then.
Good afternoon, Mr. Kaufman. Can you please state your name for the court? What is your age?
I'm 24 years old.
Where do you currently reside?
I currently live in Martinsville, Massachusetts.
What is your current occupation?
I'm a waiter at the French restaurant Snyder's in Martinsville.
How did you become involved with this case?
I was with Cesar the night of July 4th. I witnessed the incident happen, and I brought her to the fireworks.
Now I'd like to discuss your relationship with Ms. Larson. When did you first meet Ms. Larson?
My freshman year of high school, I got to know Cesar.
Where did you both attend high school?
We both went to Planned Cooperative Learning Center. We called it PCLC.
How would you describe your relationship with Ms. Larson during high school?
To be perfectly honest, me and Cesar weren't close during high school. We were sort of in different social circles.
How would you describe Ms. Larson during high school?
Cesar was always a natural athlete, and she was probably the most disciplined person I knew in high school.
What, if anything, did you know she wanted to be after she graduated high school?
Well, you know the saying, the few, the proud, the Marines? Well, that was just like Cesar. I'd always knew she'd join the Marines because she just loved America.
To your knowledge, what was her relationship like with the other students in school?
Cesar always kept to herself, but I did know that Frosch always bullied her for being a dumb athlete and insulting her intelligence.
What, if any, relationship did you have with Mr. Frosch?
Me and Frosh were close during high school, but after high school we've gotten close, and he even helped work at the computer system at my parents' restaurant, Snyder's.
What, if anything, happened to Miss Larson after she graduated?
After she graduated, she joined the Marines, and many people, including myself, knew how brave she was to be shipped halfway across the world to fight for our country in Afghanistan.
Now let's talk about your knowledge of Miss Larson's time in Afghanistan. What, if anything, do you know happened to Miss Larson while she was serving her country?
Nothing's happened to her while she's in Afghanistan, because when she came back, she just never seemed quite the same. I don't know how to explain it.
When, if ever, did you see Miss Larson after she came back home?
I saw her back again at August 2016. She seemed different.
According to what you observed, what seemed different about her behavior upon her return?
Well, before she was always involved and active, but now she just seemed withdrawn. I don't know how to explain it, but after Caesar came back, she just never seemed quite the same.
Now I'd like to direct your attention to July 4th. Where were you with Miss Larson?
She was at my parents' restaurant, Snyder's. She came back for dinner.
Who, if anyone else, was there?
Vosh and Graham were there, and I tried my best to keep them apart from Caesar.
Why did you try keeping them apart?
I knew that Caesar was having a hard time coming back home, and I just didn't want any trouble to happen, but Vosh ended up coming over and saying something to Caesar, and she seemed a bit upset about it.
Where did you and Miss Larson go after the incident?
We stopped by her house so she could grab some money, and then we headed over to the fireworks.
So after you left the restaurant, what, if anything, did you notice about Miss Larson's behavior?
She seemed a bit jumpy, a little anxious and agitated.
What, if anything, did you notice about Miss Larson's behavior while you were at the fireworks?
Well, she jumped every single time the firecrackers went off, and then suddenly she got up and screamed, "They're gonna get us!" And then she shot Jamie Frosh.
After Miss Larson shot Mr. Frosch, what did you do?
I immediately tackled her down before she could shoot anyone else.
What happened after you tackled down Miss Larson?
She just laid there, and I waited for the police to arrive.
What did you do then?
I looked her in the eye, and she seemed different.
How did she seem different?
She looked out of it like she wasn't herself, like she wasn't the Caesar that I remembered.
How did you feel when the police took her away?
I felt like that woman who shot Fosh, that just never seemed like her. The Caesar that I knew, she would never hurt anybody, and that she just didn't seem like her on July 4th.
What, if any, contact did Detective DeVea have with you afterwards?
The detective never talked to me afterwards, even though I witnessed the entire incident happen.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examined on the resolution?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Kaufman. You knew the defendant today, Ms. Larson, while in high school?
Yes,
You two played on the same baseball team?
we did.
Would you say that you knew her very well in high school?
You could say so.
Do you recall an incident in high school in which the defendant, Ms. Larson, gestured with her fingers pointed in the shape of a gun to the now deceased Jamie Frosch?
Yes,
Is this a fair and accurate representation of the gesture you saw Ms. Larson direct to Mr. Frosch?
yes, once.
Let's move on now to July 4th, 2016. You and Ms. Larson were both at your family's restaurant, Schneider's. Isn't that right?
We were.
Jamie Frosch also happened to come to the restaurant that night.
Yes,
And you plan to keep them separated in the restaurant.
I did.
Jamie did, however, approach Ms. Larson.
He did.
And you can't testify as to the nature of the conversation between the two, can you?
I can.
And after that conversation, Ms. Larson gestured, once again, with her hand in the shape of a gun.
She did.
Was this the same gesture you saw while in high school?
Yes.
In your affidavit, you say that Ms. Larson gave him the old finger to the head like a gun. Is this a fair and accurate representation of the gesture you saw?
You could say so.
Now, Mr. Kaufman, that would mean that Ms. Larson made a threatening gesture with her fingers shaped like a gun, pointed to her head, just hours before going on to shoot Jamie Frosch in the head. Isn't that right?
Yeah, she wasn't feeling back there.
And after that, you hustled Jamie Frosch outside.
I did.
And before stopping at the fireworks, you stopped with Ms. Larson at their home. Isn't that right?
I did.
Did you have any knowledge that Ms. Larson was carrying with them a loaded and concealed firearm?
No.
And she went out to shoot and kill Jamie Frosch with that firearm. Isn't that right?
Sadly, she did.
You and Ms. Larson arrived at the fireworks shortly after 8:30 p.m.
We did.
Did Ms. Larson begin shooting when you arrived?
No.
In fact, you saw Jamie Frost and Joe Graham, correct? And you approached them shortly after 9 p.m.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Kaufman, I need your help in visualizing the park that night. Jamie Frost was seated behind you and Miss Larson, correct?
Yes.
And there was a crowd of people there.
Yes.
And when the fireworks began, Larson jumped out of her chair and turned around so that she was facing Jamie Frost.
She did.
And Miss Larson shouted, "They are going to get us in." Isn't that right?
She did.
Mr. Kaufman, they is a plural, meaning to represent more than one person, correct?
Yes, she was hallucinating.
However, Miss Larson only shot and killed one person.
That is her.
That night, she only shot and killed Jamie Frost.
Yes.
Out of the 4 bullets she fired into a crowd of many potential victims, Miss Larson shot and killed only Jamie Frost.
Because I tapped her down before she could shoot anyone else.
And as far as you know, Jamie Frost also happened to be the only person in that crowd to whom Miss Larson made a threatening gesture towards only hours before. Thank you for further questions.
We have redirected this witness.
No redirector.
The witness is excused. Thank you, sir. Is the defense ready to call their next witness?
Yes, the defense would like to call Cesar Larson to the stand.
Good evening, Ms. Larson. Please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear and affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, according to the mock trial rules and affidavit. All right, you are under oath, and you may proceed.
Could you please state your name for the court?
My name is Cesar Larson,
And where are you from?
Martin Landing, Massachusetts.
What is your current occupation?
I'm currently unemployed. Since coming back from the Marines, it's been pretty tough to find a job I can do.
So you said you came back from the Marines. When did you enlist?
As soon as I could. The day of my 18th birthday, I signed up to go fight for this country that I love.
What was your job in the Marine?
I was trained in surveillance and other special operations at boot camp before I was deployed to Afghanistan twice.
What was your first deployment like?
My first deployment was pretty rough. I was in Helmand Province, and it was my job to secure major cities and towns, and so for about 10 months straight, I was always in harm's way.
What was your second deployment like?
Helmand Province was pretty brutal, but that was nothing compared to Kandahar, which was considered the most dangerous place in the world at the time because it was a hotbed for the Taliban insurgency. I would know, since I was attacked there.
Could you please explain what happened when you were attacked?
I could try. It's really painful.
Your Honor, can I just have a moment to recollect yourself?
Take a moment. Yes, you can take a moment.
Are you ready to proceed?
I am.
I'm going to ask you 3 questions about the attack. Sorry, this is difficult for you.
It's
When were you attacked?
October 29, 2015. A day I'll never be able to forget.
What time of the day was your attack?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance. What is the time of the day? How did you the attack?
Your Honor, I'm simply trying to make a connection to the day that Ms. Larson experienced a traumatic incident in her deployment, comparing it to the night of July 4th, 2016, when an incident happened.
Very good. Overruled.
What time of the day was the attack?
It was late evening. I remember it was so dark outside, I could barely see my hand in front of my face.
What were you doing at the time of the attack?
Well, we were in a convoy coming from a supply depot and heading back to base.
And what, if anything, significant happened on the ride back?
Well, we were running along, as we normally do, when all of a sudden I heard a loud, almost deafening explosion. I looked out, and I saw that our vehicle had hit an IED and was engulfed in a ball of flames.
What is an IED?
An improvised explosive device. The enemy would place these bombs all over the road where they could hurt innocent civilians and troops.
So the IED exploded. What happened after that?
Well, everything was up in flames. There was Taliban insurgents shooting at us. I was terrified.
And how long did this go on for?
It felt like forever. It was dark. It was dusty. It was hot. And I was sure I was going to die. Especially when the adrenaline rush wore off and I realized I'd been shot several times and was losing a lot of blood.
And after your attack at Kandahar, what if any medical attention did you receive?
Well, I went to a nearby military hospital for bullet wound treatments, and I also underwent a psychological discharge screening.
And who conducted these psychological screenings?
Dr. Dana Pilch.
And how long did these screenings last? Good.
15 minutes.
Now let's talk about what happened upon your return from the Marine. Where did you live after coming back to the States?
Well, after coming back, I moved to Saltoffville, which is a town over from Martin's Landing, where my mother lives. I thought being around familiar surroundings and people as I looked for a job would help me readjust.
And how did that work out for you?
Not well. Since coming back from the Marines, I've had trouble sleeping. When I can fall asleep, I see the faces of my dead friends, or I see myself killed by the Taliban. I wake up, heart pounding, feeling right back in Kandahar.
Besides insomnia, what if anything else abnormal happened in your daily life?
Well, it's embarrassing to admit, but I get anxious and jump around loud noises. I get scared around people and things I don't know. I'm terribly irritable all the time, and I know it's affected my friendships.
In what ways have it affected your friendships?
Well, no one answers my calls anymore. No one wants to hang out, and they only seem interested in me when I'm buying a round of drinks at the bar.
Now let's talk about the evening of July 4th, 2016. What did you do at the beginning of the evening?
Well, me and my friend Alex Kaufman went to Schneider's restaurant for dinner before the fire was discovered.
And what did you do after dinner?
Well, since Schneider's was a bit more expensive than I remembered, we headed back home so I could grab some money. And I also grabbed the favorite sidearm of my late father, because it helps him feel safe and secure. Then we headed over to the fireworks. That's it.
So once you arrived at the park, about how many people were there?
Well, there had to be hundreds. People come from all over central Massachusetts to see these fireworks. So by the time we got a place to sit, it was dark and definitely crowded.
And what happened after you sat down?
Well, after some firecrackers went off, all of a sudden there was Taliban started shooting at us out of the brush. All I could think about was protecting my friends. So I got my sidearm and I shot the target. I neutralized the threat, or at least I thought I did.
And what occurred after you fired?
Well, I was tackled, arrested, brought to the police station, where I was told what really happened. I shot and killed Jamie Frosch. I'd taken the life of an innocent civilian. I never meant to hurt anybody. Jamie! I'm sorry.
Okay, no more further questions, ma'am.
Is there a cross-exam of this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Larson. I just want to say thank you for your service. The Commonwealth will thank you. So you joined the military at age 18.
I did.
And you were trained how to use guns effectively for the proper situations.
I was trained.
In a smaller style, like a more personal,
Yes.
like a pistol.
Yes.
Ms. Larson owned a vast collection of guns.
Well, they were my father's, and when he passed,
But you do own a vast collection of guns.
I do own guns.
And from your experience, you can say you're an expert shot.
Yes, I was trained in the military.
So it's safe to say you know how to use firearms.
Definitely.
Now, Ms. Larson, let's talk about the main field. You state that you and Jimmy Frosch have always had a tense relationship.
Definitely in high school we did.
He used to tease you.
Yes,
He called you stupid.
he did call me that.
And this taunting made you hurt and angry.
Yes, as it would be anybody in Gold.
Now, Ms. Larson, you have threatened to kill Jamie Frosch multiple times.
When I was a kid, I said stupid things that I regret.
And on one occasion, you threatened to kill Jamie Frosch in the DQ parking lot,
Yes, I was very angry that day, and I regret that.
where you pointed your fingers in the shape of a pistol and aimed it at him.
Yes, just my fingers though, arm.
And you threatened that you had guns in your car.
Well, I had just come back from target practice, so I did have guns in my car.
And you made it up.
I did make it home.
And now, Ms. Larson, on July 4th, you finally took Jamie Frosh's life,
I thought it was the Taliban insurgents, but yes, it was actually me.
shooting him in the head
Yes,
with a pistol,
yes,
like you so previously threatened.
yes, a horrible coincidence.
Now, Ms. Larson, I would like to turn your attention to the night of the crime. 2 hours before you killed Jamie Frosh, you were at Schneider's meeting when Jamie Frosh walked in.
Yes, it was.
And again, you pointed your fingers in the shape of a pistol and aimed it at his head.
Yes, I wanted it to get away from me. I didn't want him.
Once again, threatening him with a gun.
Yes, I regret it.
And you thought you heard Jamie Frosh say that would be a mistake to offer you a job.
I did thought he'd say that. I did think that he said that, but my friend Alex Kaufman cleared that up for me.
And this is a job that you desperately need.
Well, in this economy, we all need a job.
So the thought of a job being taken away from you because of Jamie Frosh angered you.
It did make me a little irritated, but not after Alex Kaufman cleared it up for me.
And you heard Jamie Frosh say that him and Jill Graham were going to the fireworks display.
Yes, we were all.
And that they would be sitting at the picnic tables.
Yes, it was.
And right after this, you went to your house
Yes.
to pick up a weapon.
Well, to pick up money and my favorite sidearm, which I have a license to carry.
So you did pick up a weapon.
I did.
And you went to the fireworks display where you killed Jamie Frosh.
I didn't mean to. I meant to kill the Taliban insurgents.
Miss Larson, please answer my question. That's where you killed Jamie Frosh?
Yes.
Thank you. And the fireworks were supposed to go off at 9.
Yes.
But Miss Larson, some firecrackers were already going off before 9. Correct?
Yes, there were.
And these didn't trigger your alleged hallucination and PTSD?
I wish I could explain why, but no, they did not trigger.
The actual fireworks display did.
Yes, they did.
And Miss Larson, just to clarify things, you were facing the fireworks because they were supposed to go off.
Yes. I
So we
did.
can assume that the Taliban insurgents came from that direction?
Well, they seemed like they were coming from every direction.
And Miss Larson, so when you were triggered by the fireworks, you got up.
I did.
And you turned away from the fireworks and the insurgents.
Well, I was turning towards the insurgents as they were rushing towards me.
And then you shot into the crowd.
I did.
And you coincidentally hit Jamie Frosh, the very man who you hated since middle school.
A horrible coincidence.
You didn't kill and shoot Jill Graham, who was sitting right next to Jamie,
Well, I was tackled before I could hurt anybody else.
or anybody else in the crowd.
I was tackled before I could hurt anybody
You didn't even harm the person who was sitting right next to you. Your friend Alex Hoffman.
Alex Kaufman tackled me before I could hit him.
You somehow, out of a huge crowd, a family and children, at a fireworks display, killed Jamie Frosh.
I meant to kill the Taliban Insurgents Council.
But did you kill Jamie Frosh that night? And Miss Larson, you clearly recall all the events that happened that night.
Yes.
No more questions from me.
Sir, redirect to the defendant.
Yes, Your Honor. Miss Larson, could you please tell us why you fired your weapon?
Well, I thought there were Taliban insurgents rushing at me and my friends, so all I could think about was defending them, like I've been trained to do.
No more further questions, no.
Thank you. Recross.
No, Your Honor.
The witnesses, please excuse.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Does the defense wish to call on the witness?
Yes, good afternoon, Your Honor. At this time, defense would like to call Dr. Carly to the stand.
All right.
Permission to move by the court, Your Honor.
Permission granted, ma'am. Good evening, doctor. Please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear to or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, according to mock trial rules and affidavits. All right, you are sworn in, ma'am. You may proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Could you please state your first and last name for the court?
Dr. Carly,
And what is your current occupation?
I am a clinical psychologist.
Could you please describe your educational background?
I graduated from Boston University in 1968, where I received my bachelor's in psychology. I then attended Yale University, where I received my doctorate.
Thank you. May I push the bench, Your Honor?
Yeah. Okay, the documents marked for identification only. You may approach, please.
Could you please identify the first document?
The first document is my curriculum statement.
And how do you know it belongs to you?
It has my name on it, I wrote it, and it takes off my personal and professional credentials.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of your credentials?
Yes, it is.
Could you please identify the second document?
The second document is the 309.81 post-traumatic stress disorder criteria.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of the criteria?
Yes, it is.
And how is it relevant to the case?
These are the criteria I use to diagnose Ms. Larson with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Thank you, doctor. At this time, Your Honor, I would like to move Exhibit A and B into evidence as defense exhibit 1 and 2.
Any objection by the prosecution?
No objection, Your Honor.
Documents will be moved into evidence.
Now, after graduating, what if anything did you do to get professional experience?
I interned at Mass General Hospital for 2 years. At the end of that time, I had a total of 2,000 intern hours. I also wrote my dissertation, which made me an official doctor of psychology.
Other than completing your dissertation and completing internship hours, what if anything did you do to get professional experience?
I worked at the Worcester Forensic Psychologist for a little while. I eventually opened my own clinical practice in Southborough, Mass.
What if anything did you do at the Worcester Forensic Psychologist?
I provided basic psychological evaluations for both adult and juvenile alleged offenders.
What if any publications do you have?
I've published several articles. Among them is A Case of Legal Ignorance, the collision between post-traumatic stress disorder as affecting combat veterans and legal punishment, as well as several others.
What if any conferences or workshops have you attended to in order to increase your knowledge in this field?
I'm a regular attendant at the annual Smith Conference on combat stress. I also attend several other workshops.
At this time, Your Honor, I would like to introduce Dr. Carla Lee as an expert in the field of clinical psychology in order to give her expert opinion on the witness of potential post-traumatic stress disorder.
Is there an objection, please?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, the witness is entered in, is recognized by the court as an expert to offer her opinion.
Now let's turn your attention to the case as a whole. When did you first meet Susan Larson?
I met her in late April 2016.
What, if anything, did you and Ms. Larson discuss?
We talked a lot of things, but she had a lot of questions concerning PTSD.
When were you contacted again by Ms. Larson?
I wasn't contacted again until after her arrest.
What was the first step you took after being contacted by Ms. Larson?
I conducted an extensive background interview, and I also conducted 2 tests. The first was the Minnesota Multi-Phasic Personality Inventory, or MMPI for short, and the Wetchliffe Adult Evaluation.
Could you please elaborate on what the MMPI is?
The MMPI is a comprehensive gold standard personality test that provides a basic diagnosis for the presence of PTSD.
And when you conducted this test on Ms. Larson, what was the result?
The test revealed that she had elevated scores for anger, antisocial behavior, anxiety, depression, low positive emotions, decreased libido, and hypervigilance.
What steps did you take after interviewing Ms. Larson?
After my interview with her, I diagnosed her with PTSD.
Using what?
Based on the 309.81 criteria.
And how many criteria were there?
There's a total of 6.
How many criteria did Ms. Larson meet?
She met 4, which is more than her.
What were the names of those criteria?
They're simply named criteria A, B, C, and D.
Why do you believe Ms. Larson met criteria A?
Criteria A focuses on when a person has been exposed to a traumatic event. In this case, Ms. Larson was under attack by the Taliban, which I believe is a traumatic event.
And how did Ms. Larson met criteria B?
Criteria B is reliving that traumatic event. Ms. Larson reported reliving it by persistent thoughts, images, and nightmares.
And on what factors were you able to conclude that Ms. Larson did in fact meet criteria C?
Criteria C is when a person tries to avoid the memory of a traumatic event. She met it based on 4 factors. The first was her inability to recall important aspects of the event. The second was diminished interest in things she used to enjoy. The third was feelings of detachment. And lastly, it was made on complaints by her friends and family on her inability to have loving feelings.
What extrapolation did you make for criteria D?
Criteria D is the advancement of persistent stimulus that wasn't there before the event. I said that she met this because she reported difficulty falling or staying asleep, and she had nightmares, and she also carried a concealed weapon, which is consistent with her hypervigilance.
Could you please elaborate on the reason why someone who met criteria D would carry a concealed weapon?
Someone who met criteria D would carry concealed weapon because they feel insecure, so the weapon gives them a sense of security.
Okay. And now, Dr. Butch also conducted a test regarding Ms. Larson's PTSD. Now, what if any regards do you have to what Ms. Larson was diagnosed with Dr. Butch?
I had several problems in the way Dr. Phil conducted her diagnosis. She didn't spend enough time with the defendant. She spent only 30 seconds per question, and the method she used is not recognized by the American Psychiatric Association.
What if any effect does the late onset have on Ms. Larson's Dr. Pilcher's ability to diagnose Ms. Larson?
Late onset means that the symptoms weren't being present at the time that Dr. Pilch conducted her interview, so she could not have noticed the symptoms of PTSD.
Now, based on your examination of Ms. Larson, you reviewed all the facts in the affidavit and your extensive experience treating the mental illness, what can you conclude on Ms. Larson's behavior the night of the 4th of July?
To a reasonable degree of medical certainty, I can say that PTSD caused the shooting on the night of the 4th of July. The fireworks set off a hallucination, and she could not form the intent to harm or kill a human being.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examine this witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Doctor. Now, I understand this has been a long time case, so I'm going to ask you a few yes or no questions. Is that okay? So you're a veteran? Been in the Army?
Yes.
Yet you state you like the way the Army treats traumatized soldiers, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance?
I'm just trying to establish the main reason why Dr. Halloween went into this field.
Your argument relevance, why?
As to why it's necessary to know if she was a veteran, if she was in the Army.
All right, I'm going to overrule that. It goes to her overall credibility.
Yet you state you like the way the Army treats traumatized soldiers, correct?
No, I felt that they were neglected soldiers.
You just want to send them back in this battle as quick as possible, right?
That's what it looked like.
You also claim this is the main reason you became a clinical psychologist in the first place.
I became a clinical psychologist to help people.
You developed a certain empathy or fondness towards mistreated soldiers.
Not necessarily.
So most of your career entails you finding and helping soldiers who you need mistreated.
Helping anyone I felt was mistreated.
Thank you, Doctor. Now you stated you first met Cesar at a seminar. You're responsible for veterans, correct?
Yes, that's true.
You said that she seemed very interested in PTSD.
Yes, she had a lot of questions.
You first said that you gave Cesar a card and if she had any more questions or concerns about PTSD.
That's true.
But the next time you saw Cesar was after she got arrested.
Unfortunately, yes.
So she never called you back for any questions or concerns about PTSD?
No, I assumed that I had answered all her questions.
Interesting. So you fully interviewed Cesar after she got arrested?
Yes.
You gave her the test and Cesar to fully examine her?
Of course.
You said you interviewed your lawsuit to be already knowledgeable about PTSD.
Yes, that's what my interview revealed.
Seemed like she already did the research.
I wouldn't know if she did research, but yes.
You first stated that Cesar scored fairly high on the intelligence test.
Yes.
And this surprised you?
At first.
At first. So Cesar's intelligence at first surprised you, a clinical psychologist.
Yes, but then I realized she had gained experience since her time in high school, so
So it's fair enough to say that Cesar's intelligence was somewhat easy to see something more important standards.
I wouldn't do this.
Now you diagnosed Lawson with PTSD based on various PTSD criteria, correct?
That's true.
You said that Lawson passed criteria A, C, and D.
Yes.
Now you're going to get diagnosed by purging Cesar to accept her feelings and forgive herself for being unable to save her buddies, correct?
That was a suggestion I had made.
Would you say this affect Cesar for a long time?
Well, I wouldn't know.
Perhaps maybe give her nightmares?
Well, she did report having nightmares.
And you of course recall criteria being correct. So Cesar claimed to persistently experience traumatic events and energy starts and nightmares, correct?
Yes, that is what she reported.
But Watson also reported no hallucinations or flashbacks prior to when she shot and killed Jimmy Frosch.
Not to me specifically, no.
Would you say it's normal for Cesar not to report any hallucinations before killing Jimmy Frosch?
I believe that it's perfectly normal because she just met me, so I don't expect her to completely open up.
So it's normal for the defendant to coincidentally be under PTSD only when she killed Jimmy Frosch, never before.
Just because she didn't report it to me doesn't mean she hadn't experienced it before.
Are you guessing, Doctor?
No.
And you're of course aware of the last Secretary of Enoch, correct? And Cesar didn't pass these lectures.
No, I did not clear her.
So according to your diagnosis, you didn't believe Cesar's symptoms, criteria B, C, and D lasted more than 1 month.
She has delayed onset, so it is hard to tell when the symptoms actually kicked in.
You also didn't believe Caesar's disturbances were strong enough to cause any serious damage to impair the social work or the areas of life.
Well, I don't spend a lot of time with her on a daily basis,
So whatever symptoms Cesar portrayed, you didn't believe were lasting, nor strong enough to cause any serious damage to the defendant.
again, I don't spend some time with her on a daily basis.
But you diagnosed Cesar anyways, correct?
Yeah, that's her job.
No further question,
Thank you, sir. I have to redirect this witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, doctor, you're not Cesar Larson's primary doctor, are you?
No, this was the first time I had her.
So it's normal that she didn't report anything to you?
It is completely.
And obviously, since she didn't report anything to you, you have no knowledge of what she had before because she could have had she could have had delayed onsets which would result you to reach out to any other counselor that met her beforehand to not be able to diagnose her, correct?
That's correct.
No further question.
Thank you. Recross.
No, Your Honor.
The witness is excused. Does the defense have any more witnesses?
No, Your Honor, the defense rests.
All right. So both sides have rested now. I'm going to put the court, don't get up, brief, like 2 minutes, not even, a minute and a half, just for the closing arguments to get themselves ready. And then we'll hear closing arguments, and then you're going to render a verdict in the case. We're almost done. Okay, so give us like 2 minutes. Go.
8:45.
If the truth were to paint itself on that haunting July 4th night, there wouldn't just be stick figure circles and dots. It would paint an image of a dead man and a soldier across on the grass, writhing and howling in pain, screaming, must neutralize the threat. The scene would be one that was gruesome and gut-wrenching. A haunting example of how the United States Marine Corps failed a patriot that fought for 6 years in their name. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are not here today to taint Jamie Frosch's life. We are not here today to invalidate Mr. Frosch's death, and we are not here to dishonor Mr. Frosch's family. We are here to fight for an innocent woman who gave her life to our country and who was wronged by our system. Because as hard as it may seem to comprehend in a storm of passion and anger from the prosecution, it has to be known that there were 2 victims here. A man is dead because a soldier who had been through a traumatizing incident was failed to be given proper treatment. The prosecution walked in today with 3 witnesses that they thought would prove to the guilt of Cesar Larson. The prosecution held the burden of proof to prove Miss Larson guilty of murder. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, they have failed to meet that burden. Cesar Larson was a courageous soldier of the Marines. She enlisted at age 18 and fought with a passion that surpassed her every fear until a shattering moment in time on October 29, 2015. As given testimony by Miss Larson, that day is described as haunting, as Miss Larson's scene was surrounded and shot, burned and butchered by 100 members of the Taliban. You heard from Miss Larson herself. And you also heard from Dr. Pilch, the prosecution expert witness, that the psychologist who had counseled Miss Larson after this only met with her 4 times. 4 times, and just like that, they sent her back to combat. Then on January 29, 2016, finally finished after serving for 6 years, Miss Larson came to Dana Pilch's office to be screened for PTSD. 15 minutes. That was the amount of time spared for a soldier who fought for our country, a soldier who lost her team to the Taliban, a soldier who fought for our freedom to stand here today and fight for justice. 15 minutes. Miss Pilch then had the audacity to get on the stand today and testify. She was sure with 100% certainty that Miss Larson did not have PTSD, even though she spent less than 5 minutes talking to her and 3 minutes on a couple of questionnaires. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we understand that there's no way Ms. Pilch could have foreseen what would happen several months later because of her irresponsibility. But that doesn't excuse her from carrying the burden of not spending more time diagnosing Ms. Larson. As Dr. Carla Lee, a clinical psychologist with 36 years of experience, told us today, she takes issues with the inadequate tests that Ms. Larson was given because they only took 2 to 4 minutes to administer. Quick, fast, done. The horrifying consequences only came later. And Dr. Carla Lee testified today that Ms. Larson did indeed have PTSD, meeting criteria A through D of the PTSD criteria. The prosecution also claims that Ms. Larson committed the killing with malice. This is absurd. On July 4, 2016, Ms. Larson came into contact with Jamie Frosch for the first time in years. The meeting wasn't between best friends per se, but it wasn't between enemies either. Maybe in high school, Jamie Frosch was a big part of Ms. Larson's day, but after serving for 6 years and fighting the Taliban almost every day, Ms. Larson had more things to worry about than some high school nemesis. According to Commonwealth v. McHale, a person is not responsible for criminal conduct if at the time of such conduct as a result of mental illness or defect, he or she lacks the capacity to conform his or her conduct to the law. Cesar Larson was failed by a broken system, failed to be screened for the PTSD that is now so apparent she had. After serving for 6 years, 2 tours, losing countless members of her team, the United States Marine Corps only offered her a measly 4 hours and 15 minutes to rehabilitate her and screen for a mental illness that is so surprisingly common that more than 15% of all soldiers have at least some form of it. The prosecution also had the burden of proof to prove Ms. Larson killed Jamie Frosch with premeditation. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it's clear from the facts of the case that this was not even possible. After leaving high school, Jamie Frosch and Ms. Larson never had any contact. They never even heard of each other until that day on July 4th. This makes the PTSD research found on Ms. Larson's computer completely unexplainable, except to truly find out real information about this disease. And Detective Wallace testified today to finding on Ms. Larson's computer. To think this whole occurrence could have never happened if Ms. Larson was diagnosed more thoroughly is haunting. The prosecution also claimed that Ms. Larson bringing her gun to the park made it obviously clear that it was to kill Jamie Frosch. For your honor, this was a woman who spent 6 years with a gun in her hands, protecting herself and our country from every direction. To step into a huge gathering like this was already a huge step, but to think she could have done it without any sense of feeling protected is ridiculous. Cesar Larson brought a gun to the park because she was a Marine Corps soldier who had the right to a concealed weapon and the right to feel safe. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution had the burden of proof to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Larson did not have PTSD when she committed the shooting. They have failed to meet that burden. Ms. Larson had returned home from a recent tour that had shocked her system, and for months she lived alone with minimal contact. Then on July 4th, in a dark crowd, fireworks started exploding. And to Ms. Larson, who was suffering from PTSD, it brought her back to those dark alleys filled with bombs and her dead fellow soldiers in her arms. She did the only thing she could to save those soldiers, regardless of the fact that they were only in her mind. Commonwealth v. McHale ruled that a person not in the right state of mind cannot be punished for the action during that time. In fact, the prosecution's whole case is based on a screening that Ms. Pilch did for Ms. Larson. But it's now been revealed that PTSD has delayed onset, which means the symptoms that Ms. Larson had didn't show up until 6 months later, and Ms. Pilch's discharge only happened 3 months after the incident with the Taliban. To hold Cesar Larson accountable for the mistakes of careless doctors and the inadequate health system would be injustice. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we hope you will rule for justice today and free Ms. Larson to be treated. Thank you.
Counselor, is the prosecution ready to make their closing statement?
Yes, Your Honor. One bullet for anger, the second bullet for jealousy, another bullet for opportunity, and the fourth and final bullet for revenge. On the night of July 4th, 2016, Cesar Larson shot Jamie Frosch 4 times, twice in the head and twice in the chest, killing Jamie Frosch at a public fireworks display at Stanley Park. According to Massachusetts General Law 265, Section 1, any unlawful killing of another with deliberately premeditated malice aforethought is murder in the first degree.
And we, the prosecution, have proven multiple times today, through our evidence and testimony, that Cesar Larson has committed murder in the first degree. Cesar Larson had the means, the motive, and the opportunity. And on the night of July 4th, Cesar Larson most definitely had the means to murder Jamie Frosch. As we learned from Cesar Larson's testimony today, she has an extensive history and knowledge of guns, having been familiar with them from a young age. And her knowledge was expanded upon through joining the Marines at age 18 and learning how to use the proper guns for the proper situations and being an expert shot. This knowledge was used 2 hours before she killed Jamie Frosch, where she went to her house to pick up some cash and emerge with the alleged money and the weapon. Cesar Larson chose, out of all the guns in her collection, the small, concealable Klagsburg, a gun known for its power and accuracy. As Detective DeVay Wallace remarked today, this gun had been oiled beforehand and was ready to shoot someone. This minute detail shows that Larson had planned to use this gun for an event. In this case, it was killing Jamie Frosch. As soon as the fireworks went off at 9 p.m., Cesar Larson got up, knowing that Jamie Frosch would be there, knowing where Jamie Frosch was sitting, and shot Mr. Frosch not once, not twice, but 4 times, using a smaller weapon that was needed for more personal effect. As Detective DeVay Wallace testified today, the bullets that penetrated Mr. Frosch's body were not the wild firing that the defense will have you believe. Wallace also testified to the fact that Larson had taken careful aim when shooting. Larson was an expert shot and shot Jamie Frosch in the head and chest using the proper gun for the proper situation. It is not a coincidence Jamie Frosch was killed that night. It is not a miracle everybody else in the crowd emerged with their life. Cesar Larson knew exactly what she was going to do that night and whom she wanted to harm. Jamie Frosch was the only one in that huge crowd that Cesar Larson had threatened multiple times beforehand, even 2 hours before this altercation occurred. As known from Commonwealth v. Pulaski, deliberate premeditation requires specific intent. And as known from Commonwealth v. Lowe, malice aforethought includes any unexcused intent to kill. And the prosecution has proven multiple times today that Larson had the motive to act with premeditated and deliberate malice to murder Jamie Frosch. Ever since Cesar Larson had met Jamie Frosch in 7th grade, they've always had a tense and pent-up, anger-driven relationship. Jamie Frosch used to tease Cesar Larson about minute things like academic standards, but Cesar Larson's responses were blown out of proportion. She threatened to kill Jamie Frosch multiple times, the most notable being the DQ dispute, where on one occasion, she threatened to kill Jamie Frosch, shooting him in the head with a pistol, sealing this threat by cautioning Jamie that she had guns in her car. Larson and Frosch's relationship, already based on pent-up anger from the past, intensified when Larson came back from the Marines. After coming back from the military, Larson had come back and she was struggling to find a job, as she testified today. And she heard on July 4th that Jamie Frosch thought it would be a bad idea for her to get hired. Larson had, of course, had an offer of Northland Financial Services that Jamie had close ties to, so of course it would affect her feelings on this. And this reignited the anger that Larson had for Jamie and made her want to harm her and finally caused Jamie the pain that she thought he deserved. Members of the jury, we, the prosecution, have every reason to believe Cesar Larson did not have PTSD on the night of July 4th or any time before then, and she murdered Jamie Frosch first degree. As testified today by Dr. Dana Pilch, an experienced and qualified clinical psychologist, Cesar Larson had undergone psychological screenings as part of her comprehensive exit screenings to find and address anxiety, depression, PTSD, anything that could be affecting her at the time. Dr. Pilch even states that on each test, Larson didn't raise any suspicion of any mental disorder, not even coming close to being diagnosed with PTSD. Dr. Dana Pilch even recommended follow-up actions that Cesar Larson could take in case of any feelings of anxiety or stress. But Cesar Larson never took these next steps. Cesar Larson never even showed up for a post-90-day health screening. Cesar Larson neglected herself. Cesar Larson had the means, the extensive history with guns from a young age and having her own collection. She had the motive, the pent-up anger from the past being reignited when Larson came back from the military, and the opportunity, the firework display, being able to cover up the gunshots under the cover of night. Members of the jury, we submit to you today, through the evidence, it has shown beyond a reasonable doubt that Cesar Larson was of sane and sound mind when she murdered Jamie Frosch. And we urge you to side with the prosecution today and convict Cesar Larson of first-degree murder for the killing of Jamie Frosch. Thank you.
Okay, so we're right now, the trial's over, and we're going into the deliberation phase, which is where you guys come in. We have one charge here today. There are lesser included offenses, but for the purposes of tonight, we're going to have one charge. It's first-degree murder or nothing. Again, defined in some of the case law the attorneys brought up, first-degree murder in the Commonwealth is the unlawful killing of another with premeditated and deliberate malice aforethought. What that basically means is it was planned out and there was an intent to kill. It's also pointed out in the closings that if the person is not, due to mental disease or defect, can't conform to the law, they can't be held responsible. So the question in this case, to simplify that for you a little bit, comes down to, did Cesar Larson's PTSD cause the shooting? If you think yes, then you're going to find the defendant not guilty. If you think that Cesar Larson either didn't have PTSD or the PTSD did not cause the shooting, then you're going to find Cesar Larson responsible for the shooting, and you will find the defendant guilty. Okay? What I'm going to do right now, we're going to do the poll everywhere. So if you have a phone, you can take your phones out. Normally what happens is we deliberate for as long as it took. I'm going to let you deliberate for about a minute or two. Then I'm going to give you the number to text in. You're going to push A for guilty, B for not guilty. I'll tell you that in a minute. But talk to the people next to you just for 1 minute while I get the phone number. Order in the court, please. Here's how this works. This is new to me. I've never done this until right now, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway, it's poll everywhere. So you're going to go on your phone. As if you were going to send a text. You're going to text your response to 37607, but don't push anything yet. Just type that in, send the address 37607, and then in the text message area where you would write your text, you're going to write Rick Tivnan 268. That's RICKTIVNAN 268. You're going to text that first, and then you'll get a reply asking for your verdict. I'm going to say it again. You're sending the text to 37607. Say it again. I don't think it matters.
Is this one word?
One word. RICKTIVNAN 268. Send that text, you should get a reply.
Hey, I'm getting my head. Yo.
Bear with me.
Damn, son. Yo, that shit was mad funny. She was like, was that your wife, your mistress, your sister, your mother? And he was mad quiet, the dumb one. And he's like, no, she was I was like, that shit killed me, bro. I was bent over laughing. Yo, you came to summer.
No, listen to her.
Huh?
He came to summer.
Your Honor.
Yeah.
I'm going to open the polls out. Give me 1 second. A is guilty, B is not guilty. But it's not going to let you do it here.
A is guilty, B is not guilty. Yo, I'm telling you, if everybody, I'm probably not gonna get it, but if everybody fought legal cards, their legal cards, it's going to be beat. Wow, I'm telling you. We talk about this a lot. I'm just took a piss. Yo, I say we just do the old fashioned aye.
Open now, guilty for A, not guilty is B. Just text that in.
Yo, it's the same thing. How do you get Dick? Like, how do you get Joe? How do you get? But that's like classic, like white men nicknames. Teddy. Ted comes from yo, well, okay, I'm telling you right now.
Does everyone have an opportunity to vote?
Because my name's not a white name. Huh? B. What did they put?
Alright, I guess poll is full, apparently, so that's okay. But I think we have enough. So at this time, poll is full, we have enough. So we're ready to the verdict now. Will the defendant please rise? Step onto the stage. Okay, after the conclusion of this case, the jury has come to a decision and they have found the defendant not guilty. Interesting to watch, 63 to 38%. 63 to 38%. Thank you all for coming.